It's official, the first plant haul of 2025 is here, and you already know I could not resist adding some more new plants to my collection. So in this video, I'm going to show you the plants that I got. I will be repotting some of them, and also I'll be answering some of your Q&A questions about plant care that you dropped in one of my last posts. So sit down, grab some coffee, get comfortable while we chat about plants and we get these beauties to their new home. Hey everyone, Pablo from Aroid Vibes Only, and today I'm super excited to bring you my first plant haul of the year. So step number one will be creating some substrate for my plants. So let's do that. So whenever you get a new plant, the first thing you want to do is figure out what kind of substrate it needs. Well, ideally you already have this in mind before purchasing the plant, but sometimes we get really excited and we just buy a bunch of plants and then that's like more of an afterthought. But in this case, I am very aware of what I'm doing with these plugs. I would usually put them into like a semi-hydro pond or something like that mix. But this time around, I'm going to go for a very chunky Aroid non-soil mix. Mostly because I want to encourage the roots to push out of the plug and then go into like the perlite and go into the reservoir and ideally get some water roots super fast so I can just move them into semi-hydro even quicker. So the most important ingredient that you need, and literally everyone just needs for all of their mixes, is going to be perlite. Perlite is just like magic when it comes down to plants, so you're just gonna need a lot of it. The biggest issue with perlite is it's super dusty. So while I'm going to add 60% of this, I am indoors and I have a fan blowing, but we want to keep at the minimum the amount of dust. So let's see how that goes. All right, that was pretty good. So perlite is going to be the most important ingredient in our mix. I'm going to basically put like 60% perlite, and then the rest is going to be some sphagnum moss and then some orchid mix. So sphagnum is also very important because it helps with like the retention, moisture retention, and also it just helps with the overall like nutrients. They store well there. It just helps with the volume, and then you just want to kind of break it down into smaller pieces. I know some people that will grab like scissors. Let me see if I have some. Yeah, I do. All right. They will grab some scissors like this, and then they will literally... I can do this. All right. They will grab some scissors like this, and they will like very slowly kind of like cut it into pieces. I guess that works if you have the patience for it. I feel like that's gonna take forever. So what I'm going to do is I'm gonna hold it really tight with one hand, and then I'm just gonna kind of like twist and pull it out, almost like you're pulling like feathers or something like that. That feels like a very specific reference. Like, how many people have pulled feathers? All right, so usually I would just move all of my plugs into like a semi-hydro mix. I would try to put them into like perlite and some pond or something like that to just instantly sort of like jump the entire board and just go directly to semi-hydro. But I found that as I was doing some of the more obscure species or more delicate hybrids, those plants were just crashing for months. So what I decided to do was sort of make a super transition period in which I still use an Aroid kind of mix to get the plant to grow to a more established size before I put it into semi-hydro. I think the issue with the plugs is that they're really dense. So they're made out of some kind of cocoa peat or some kind of, I don't know, it almost feels like a fern fiber almost. So it's super airy and the plants love it, but it makes all of the roots that grow on there to be like going specifically through the plug. I don't know if you've ever had like a root grow through sphagnum, and then whenever you try to pull like the sphagnum piece out of the root, you just like it's impossible because it's growing through the moss. Like that's exactly how it grows through that plug. So it makes it really difficult just for you to be like, all right, I'm just going to remove all the plug without ripping all of the roots. So because they're so small and so delicate, some of the species that I purchased, I am just gonna go with mostly perlite and a little bit of this, just to like switch it up a little bit. I think that's enough. Again, part of me almost wants to put it in like 100% perlite and see how that goes, because I just don't want it to get too dense and completely rot away. Oh, you can see all the powder moving. All right, fan it out. But that's all right. I'll just mix it as I go with this. We'll just mix it little by little, trying to prevent a lot of dust from coming up. So the plants that I purchased, I'm super excited. These are species that you usually don't run into. And if you do, you'll have them be super, super expensive. So even though I made an entire video about my 2025 wishlist plants, these are none of those. And that's mostly because sometimes I run into Alocasia species or hybrids that you usually just don't see, and I cannot resist purchasing them if they're there with a great price. So the ones that I got are from the Greenscape, who they've been the seller from Palmstreet. Check out the link below. We both get a little bit of bonus. So on Palmstreet, you can purchase your plants is via auction, or some of them just have like listed on their profile. So the pros and the cons about the Greenscape, I'll give you a quick little review of that seller. Is that pro, they have one of the biggest catalogs I have ever seen. They have one of the biggest varieties when it comes down to Aroids, when it comes down to all of the different like genuses and species. They have so many options. But with all of that diversity comes the issues that they have, which is like sometimes you just get sent the wrong plant. Like, I don't think it's intentional. It's just one of those things where the person picking them will just get confused and saying the wrong plant. They did that in one of my purchases last year at the end of the year, but they got back to me ASAP when I sent in the pictures. They sent me the correct plant and they did not charge me anything extra. So I have nothing but good things to say about them because I keep purchasing from them, obviously. But sometimes you will expect getting the incorrect plant, which is not a problem when you're paying $12 per, right? And they'll make you good. I think this time around, I purchased one that was supposed to be in Chantrieri, like the Chan. It's basically a Cuprea and a Sanderiana hybrid. And looking at what they sent, this to me looks just like a Cuprea because I have that Cuprea up there. So this looks just like that. So I'm assuming that that one is incorrect, but I just did not feel like reaching out to them. All right, so some of the species that I found will just go down as I'm potting. So as usual, what you're going to need is going to be something to become the reservoir. It could be any kind of cup. The container that you're using, I use clear pots because it allows me to look at the roots and see how that's doing. And then I add little holes with a soldering iron that we're going to use in a little bit. So the first one is going to be a perfect fit because it is the perfect size for it. And then inside it, you're going to get some kind of wick. This wick is super important because this is what's going to almost guarantee that your plant stays consistently moist throughout the entire time until everything from the reservoir is gone. I use the reservoirs as my #1 way of knowing when to rewater, because if it's almost empty, it means the plant has sucked all the water using this if it does not have any roots in there. So this is super, super important, at least at the beginning, until they throw some roots in there. So you're going to very simply put this, you're going to put that on top, you're going to put this through, don't let it go all the way to the bottom, and just have it sticking up. So I'm going to start off with the base that we made, you know, the perlite and that. I'm just going to put my cup inside so it doesn't create too much of a mess. Then I'm just going to put some of the perlite and everything else here. And always trying to make sure that I don't crush the wick, because sometimes you just like will crush it. All right, so I think that is good enough when it comes down to that. You see it? Don't worry, I'll share with you the view using some glasses in a second. So once you have it like this, this is the part where we're just gonna put it on the side and put the first plant. So the first plant that I'm gonna put in here, because it's the smaller one, is going to be one of the more rare ones that we got. So, I mean, I guess it's rare because you don't really see it offered too often. This is going to be the Alocasia Lukiwan, which is a hybrid originating from, I believe, Indonesia. I'm putting on the screen some of the nuances of this plant. So I'm going to very carefully remove some of the plug that I see that it does not have anything in there. It doesn't have any roots. It's just like extra plug in there. I'm just gonna pull it out really gently to expose some of the roots to the substrate. So this is just exposing a little bit. I don't want to rip everything because, again, it's really, really difficult to remove it without completely balding everything. You're just gonna rip it. So at the top, you usually end up with a bunch of substrate that has no roots whatsoever. That's just the way it works. All right. So this is what I feel comfortable with removing. As you can see, I still have a little bit in the plug in there. But this is what we're gonna do. So I'm gonna put it here. I wanna make sure that it's covered. I don't want it to be sticking, up above. And then I'm going to add a little bit more of this, making sure that I get some of that perlite and the moss. And I'm gonna put it sideways, and then I'm just gonna tap, 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 tap. Make sure you keep it straight. All right, I'm gonna get to the point where it can hold its own, so it's not like tipping over or anything like that. And then once I get to this point, I just pull a little bit. That is just a good habit in case it has some roots there. Then once the plant is stable enough, then we're going to add a little bit of our mycorrhizal spores. Just a couple scoops with that spice scooper. And then we're just gonna cover the rest with some more of the mix we made. And then you're just going to repeat the process with all of them. So Lukiwan is one of those plants and Alocasias that I think is exactly what the plant community and just the scientific community overall does not like, which is naming plants after people with no good reason. So it's one thing whenever they name an actual like species, right? And it has like the Latin name and it sounds kind of funny after like a scientist or a celebrity, like that's one thing. But a completely different one is whenever a plant enters the cultivation because of someone who made the hybrid or someone who kind of like poached it low-key. Allegedly, the whole Jackling drama of like, where did it come from? Why is it named that? And now we're calling it, Tanderusa, as it should be. I believe that as long as we're all in agreement of what it should be called with the scientific name, like there's no need to be using other names that are just confusing. So Lukiwan, I was reading about it, and that one is basically a hybrid that was created, and I think it's named after like the wife or the nursery that they had. So that is literally the entire origin of that plant. Now, this second plant is the Alocasia Nobilis, which the only reason I have it, which Nobilis I believe is also like a Sanderiana, like either a cultivar or a hybrid or something like that. I'm putting on the screen. And the main reason I got it is because a variegated version of this, the pink one, pink Nobilis, as always, I'm playing, all that footage. That one is just beautiful, and it has entered the market over, I don't know, the past 6 months, like everywhere I see it, and it's so expensive. So I want to make sure I like the actual plant before I'm out here like purchasing like a really, really expensive variegated version of it. So this is, I'm basically showing you what it looks like. And it is an interesting plant. I kind of like the way the lobes look. It is different than the poly or the Amazonica just because it creates almost like this sectionality that is kind of interesting. So, this is basically the backstory of this plant. For the next few plants, they go into the small sort of clear container, the same one that we had for the Lukiwan. But the biggest issue with that was the, you can see the smoke, it's plastic burning. Yay, to having airflow. The plastic containers do not have enough aeration for the plants. So if you just go and put them in a container just like this and don't make holes, I found it really difficult to not keep the roots from like rotting. The moment I started creating holes in my containers was the instant that I saw a big change in like my Alocasias experience. Also, and this is including when I was doing semi-hydro, I just think they need the extra airs. So whether you're using like a net pot like I am as well, or you're using a container like this, like you need to make sure you're adding some holes. And if you're wondering what is the thing that I'm using here for this, this is called like an iron solder. This is similar to what they use for like chips and stuff like that. But this is super, super dangerous to have. Like, this is my PSA to you. As you can see, I moved, video about it soon. But I basically used to live somewhere that had a floor that was like, I forget what's the name, but it's basically not really flammable, as flammable. So I would just put this right next to me without thinking much of it, just making sure that I didn't burn myself, because this will burn the shit out of you. But these are known for causing house fires. So if you get this, you need to be like on it, because it heats up instantly almost. It's just a hot iron, and if it's touching anything that's flammable, it will make it catch on fire. But it's also super useful to make holes in anything that's plastic, or to melt any kind of metal that has a low melting point. So if you get one of these, just make sure you're always putting it into like a glass, something that is not touching anything that might melt or that might catch on fire. But they're super useful. As you can see, now we have some containers with better aeration. So now we can continue with our repot. So the next plant is actually the entire reason I placed this order. And this is the Alocasia, let me get the pronunciation correct, Puncakborneensis, obviously from Borneo. This is a plant that is fairly uncommon in like cultivation, with people and stuff like that. So I found someone on Facebook, and she was basically selling this plant, or at least like a pup. And she was here in South Florida. She was just further north, and they and I messaged them, right? They were asking like $100 for it, and I messaged them basically asking for, if they were interested in doing some kind of swap, or if they were interested in, sharing with me a little bit more about their collection in case they had some other rare plants that I was interested in purchasing, or buying like a corm, or maybe swapping for a variegated version. So I reached out to them, and then they were like, oh yeah, give me a list of the stuff that you have. And I gave her like a list of everything that I could like make a cutting. And then she was like, you have nothing rare. She was like, you have nothing that I want. And I was like, okay, like that's fine. Like I'll purchase the plant from you anyway. So then she wanted like $100 for it, which I was like, well, it's a rare one. And then they were like, well, I purchased it for like $900 or something like that, like 4 years ago. And I was like, well, that's a lot of money but that is literally the story of most people in the plant explosion that happened. A lot of stuff hit cultivation with a super high price, and then 3-4 years later, like, it's a completely different story. So I was like, well, okay, that's still sort of like not good enough for me to pay that much money, but I will do it because I don't see this plant being offered at all. Like, I've never seen another seller having it like around me or in Palmstreet. So instantly I could not get it because it was too far away and I was in the middle of moving. So I ended up just going to Palmstreet, and the Greenscape happened to have it. And I was like, you did not have this before, because I checked your catalog all the time. So it must have been a new edition that they did or something like that. So I was able to snatch it right away, and it's this one. So I'm really interested in knowing, how it grows. I know it's a very, very, very slow grower, but that is a-okay with me. I'm just excited to have it and, see where it goes. So I'm obviously sharing some pictures of it. It's an interesting plant that you don't see offered too often, but they do have it at the Greenscape. So if you can snatch it for them, I think I paid like $15. So by comparison, like, it's a no comparison. Like, if this plant was $900 4 years ago and now it's 10, like, we win. Like, we're winning that. Like, to me, that's a great deal, because now I can get to enjoy this plant, share it with you, learn more about it, and not have to pay like a whole car payment every month. All right, so this is basically what I was talking about. You can see how the plug basically just runs and grows right through, which makes it really difficult to do anything with it. So this is the Alocasia Mandalay. So let's put it here and let's hope for the best. And then the last one is going to be the one that I mentioned early, the Alocasia Chan. I don't know how to pronounce this. The Chan, Chantrieri. Okay, we'll figure it out. But that plant, I don't think this is it. I think this is a Alocasia cuprea. So we'll see what happens from it. I don't have a lot of expectations because again, it doesn't seem to be the correct plant. So these are the 5 new plants that I got from the last purchase. But before that, I made another one with them. And those plants went through a little bit of a struggle sort of like process. So one of them was the Alocasia LOCO. And this one was very similar to what I was talking about before. I had it in the plug as it came, like the others. And then I proceeded to put it in or rip it out. I mean, actually, I thought it had pretty good roots. And then I put it into some perlite and I put it into some fluval stratum, and it just completely crashed. It lost all of its leaves. It hated it. So we're gonna try that again. I ended up throwing it in a cup, in a literal cup, with just some fluval stratum, and then I ended up just putting a cap on it, and it has adapted, I think, to my environment. I don't think this is the easiest of plants, so if you see it out and about, I would recommend you thinking about it twice, or get a more established specimen, or don't pay a lot of money for it. I paid $12 and I am perfectly happy having paid that if it dies. All right, so this one we're going to put into a semi-hydro like pond one, but I'm going to try to make it like extra chunky, so I don't know, maybe that'll help out with the transition. All right, let's try this out and see how it goes. All right, so we have our thing here. All right, actually it's a mess. Yep, as usual, that's a mess. All right. Make sure the wick is not half dead, and then let's see what we're working with here. All right, I mean, that's not too bad. It's looking healthy, I think. All right, so here is this, and we're gonna try to push this higher. Boop. There we go. All right, hopefully this will work. So I asked for some questions in the Q&A sort of section of this as I was like towards the end. So someone asked if what was my thought about repotting during winter. So that was a question like, oh, right now it's winter, I have a new plant, should I be repotting it? And my answer with that is going to depend on what is the temperature inside your home, like consistently right now. So if you live somewhere, I mean, right now, half of the world is literally like summer. So the other half, you need to figure out what is the average temperature in your plant room. I recommend you getting one of those thermometers. You don't need to get anything like fancy, to be honest. Like you can just get some of those. I don't know, they're like $15. They're just like a screen with that measure temperature and humidity, and you want to get an average. So if your plant room is under 50 degrees, like consistently, you might need to bump that up if you want to keep your alocasias happy so they don't go dormant. I don't believe that alocasias, or at least most of them, have any kind of dormancy period to them. Similar to like Venus flytraps, who require some kind of dormancy, or all of the plants that are native from like North America are, you know, used to or evolved to having to deal with winter. But all of these are subtropical plants from like rainforest, so they don't really have. They have like a dry season. They have like more rain, less rain kind of situation. Not really a snow is falling kind of vibe. So when you're thinking about it yourself, what you need to do is figure out what is the temperature. So if your temperature is above 50, I think you can probably like repot it and then just make sure it stays warm. And by that I mean like 50 degrees Fahrenheit, and the humidity also needs to be above 45. So those are the two main reasons why your plant is going to stop and it will drop all of its leaves and go back to the knob. It's going to be because it got too cold for too long, so it's going back. It's going to be because it had really, really low humidity, so lost all of the leaves, or sometimes they go through like transplant shock and then they drop everything after you repot them, you know, as you have seen some of them. But in this case, like if your plant is under grow light, if your room temperature is fairly warm, you know, the humidity is okay, like it really should not make any difference whatsoever. If your plant goes in outside or it's in somewhere that is having like a very, very wide fluctuation in temperatures, by that I mean like today is gonna be 70, tomorrow is gonna be 40, and then might go into the teens, and you have like a space heater, so then maybe it gets too hot. If you're dealing with that kind of fluctuation, I recommend you might need to get like a tent. So you might get one of those like similar to this material tent. You can put in your closet or something like that. And that's going to guarantee that some of these plants stay warm and you keep the humidity high enough. Like, so I know some people that's what they do during the winter. They put them into the tent, or they have some kind of bag literally that goes around like their shelves, and it's this plastic that keeps the moisture in and keeps the heat in, and that will prevent your plants from going into shock. So if you think they will get cold, if you don't have a way of controlling the temperature, I would wait for it to be like at least spring. You know, just make sure that the plant stays healthy. If you just got your plant and it's literally sitting on like 100% peat and it just has completely drenched and it's like root rot, yeah, repot that, of course. The only time this advice is being sort of given is if this is a plant that is already growing in your environment, it's happy, and you're like, oh, this needs a repot. You know, that is when I would consider you just making sure that the temperature is warm enough and the humidity is high enough. The one time that I would say that is absolutely not true is if your plant is full of pests. So if you're looking at your plant and it's covered in spider mites or anything like that, like aphids, that's a tough one. But you're basically, you know, I know some people just completely chop off all of the leaves, and that makes the plant sort of go into a bit of a shock. But that helps, you know, prevent the pest from already being there, but it's probably going to be in the soil too. So if that's the case and you're transplanting a plant because it had a pest and you chopped off all the leaves and then you put it into new substrate, then yeah, you should do that whenever you think it's necessary to do that. So there's a lot of nuances. I don't think there's any advice that would be sort of like, yes, always, or never do that. There's a lot of things that come into the equation, which is, I think, what's so much fun about plants is not only are you learning about existing with another like organism, but you're learning how to best take care of it. And that teaches you a lot about yourself along the way. So there you have it. Thank you so much for coming to Repot, my first plant order of 2025. This is my Alocasia LOCO. This is my Alocasia Mandalay. This is my Alocasia Nobilis. This is my Alocasia Lukiwan. And this is my Alocasia Puncakborneensis. We'll figure it out. And then this is supposed to be the Chantrieri, but it's looking more like a cuprea. Thank you so much for watching, and YouTube thinks that this video will be the best one for you next.